Hi everybody, it's Eliza here from Pandemic PhD. Yes, an extended break, but necessary to sort of get everything back in order after our really sort of sad time before. But here I am with my first in a series of hopefully quick lectures or tips and tricks on how to manage yourself through this time. Now, as everyone's been saying, I'm sure you've been hearing a lot of people talk about this, that it's not normal to be working during a time like this, quite isolated, especially if you are conducting a research project, particularly a PhD project, or any sort of long-term research project. And you know, you've got things being put off and you're working alone. It's already an isolating experience, and really exhausting for everybody. So this is a little bit of a rethink of what I think managing a research project and project managing a research project should be during this time. Hope not to be interrupted too much. My children are home, as a lot of people's. I have a cockatoo, I have 2 dogs, and husband working from home as well. So anything could happen, but I will leave it here unedited with all its blemishes, just so you can kind of see what I'm dealing with, and hopefully it's something that is quite relatable for you as well. I'm really lucky to live in a beautiful area of the world. For that I'm very thankful that I'm not in somewhere like a small apartment in New York right now, and I have a nice yard and I can listen to the birds behind me. So for that I'm very thankful, and I'm certainly not isolated in the sense I've got nobody around me. I've got lots of people around me, which can be a good thing and a frustrating thing at times. So the first thing I really want to talk about is why projects usually succeed in terms of running a research project. And they usually succeed because of sound planning, support, both personal and professional support, mitigation of risk, communication planning, and clear vision and scope. And also having a clear and realistic vision and plan for your project. Now, when I usually do workshops on project managing a PhD, I do things like, you know, let's look at the risks of a particular project. Not once in my entire career of doing this have I ever thought to say to someone, oh, a pandemic, now that's a risk. Maybe only jokingly, and unfortunately this is something that I never foresaw happening in my lifetime. I never thought to tell people to you know, think more carefully about and what would they do in this situation. So, you know, the type of people that I teach range everywhere from, you know, theoretical physicists to concert pianists, and everyone in between on the research spectrum. And you know, most research work does involve other people, whether that's having to, you know, conduct interviews or go to a lab and conduct experiments or collaborate with other researchers, those sorts of things. And you can't do that now. There's only a limited amount you can do using you know, communications technology. You can't go into a lab and conduct practical experiments. You can't, it's much more difficult to conduct physical experiments on patients, for example, if you can't be there to touch them and feel what you need to feel, and you know, if there's a medical examination involved. You know, it's a different scope altogether if you're doing a project on teaching and you're learning how to teach people particular things, you know, right from children up to adults. It's a completely different ball game altogether. So we have to have a think about, you know, how this is going to impact your research directly. And these things that I talked about before, you know, things like sound planning, support, personal, professional, all of those sorts of things, the mitigation of risk, they're things that you can't really do in this situation. It's an entirely new ball game for our generation, and I think at least the generation before us. So things have to change, and I think the first thing I'd say to you is have a really close think about what is it that you need to do now to complete your research, and assuming that this is going to last us at least 6 months, and probably maybe longer, in terms of having to modify our behaviour to minimise the spread of the pandemic. How are we going to deal with that? So how are we going to sort of peel back our existing plans to look at what it is we need to do to get through this period? Are you going to have to alter your project and potentially shift it so that it takes a slightly different form, and that the parts of the project that can't be done now, whether, you know, for whatever reason, can be moved to a new project further along? And I think that that's the thing. Projects have to be managed so that they are achievable. So you may well have gone to, say, the confirmation of your PhD thesis, or to a granting body and said, this is the project I want to do. Well, that's great, but things have changed so quickly. No one could have foreseen this. So what is it that you're likely to be able to do now, ethically and sensibly, within this time period? And I think you've got to think about, firstly, the next 6 months. What is it that you're going to do in the next 6 months? And in that, know that, again, it's not a normal situation for you to be working in at all. You really need to think about that, and that you're going to have to, you know, really think about the fact that this is taking a psychological, emotional, physical toll on you, on the people you care about, and that you're going to have a think about being very kind to yourself during these times as well. I think as well, we talked about, I usually talk about things like communication planning. That too is very different in this situation where everything is having to be done over the phone, online, those sorts of things. It's a completely different scenario to what many of us anticipated. For example, usually I'd be sitting in an air-conditioned office. If I had to record an online session, I'm sitting outside in a subtropical, well, technically autumn, but it's 30 degrees today and it's damn hot. And you know, it's just it's a different situation, and all around you have to just learn to cope with, you know, what you've got. And for most of us in the Western world, we're very lucky, but it is a very serious situation. So think about, in terms of your communication planning, how you're going to communicate what you need to do with the people that need to know, whether that be your supervisors, granting bodies, research participants, all these people. It's really important to think about that, and to also be very kind to them and understand that they might be dealing with difficult situation on the other end as well. You know, they might have themselves been affected by this pandemic, or, you know, have other things that crop up that they really would usually communicate in person. I would think about things like, you know, if they've been affected by the virus themselves, or people they care about, you know, if they're in places that are more heavily affected by the virus than the places that you or I might be in, for example. Just really think about what everybody else is dealing with, and just sort of take a step back and give everybody just that little bit of extra breathing space when you are communicating with them as well. If you're doing a PhD, think about things like, ask the question of your university, are you thinking about relaxing, you know, when this will be due? When will timelines be stretched? What are you doing to accommodate things like, sorry, I just kicked a chair. What are you doing to accommodate things like, you know, submission dates and submission extension periods, those sorts of things. Now, some of these are government mandated, but you should be starting to ask questions like, are you advocating for us to get extra scholarship or extra time? What, in light of the current circumstances and the fact that my research, I can't say, for example, with my own PhD, I couldn't go to America to research in the archives. Or you know, you can't go to your lab, for example, or you can't be physically examining your patients because of the level of isolation that is required at the moment. So I know the Children's Hospital here in Brisbane, for example, it is not doing any sort of elective or patient appointments that can't, that they're postponing everything that unless it's essential to be done in person, like, you know, applying a cast, or for example, in a rehab clinic. So these are all things that you really do have to think about very, very carefully, and ask lots and lots of questions. I think that's really important. Even if you don't get an answer straight away, that is fine. Your university will not have worked everything out, or your research institution will not have worked everything out, because things move very quickly. The government's got a lot of things to think about, and education is just one aspect of that. But, you know, make sure you're communicating this clearly so the university knows that there's a problem, that they realise that they need to communicate with the higher authorities on this, with the government, whoever, and that they are making appropriate accommodations so that you can complete a very sensible, you know, project in a reasonable amount of time considering the circumstances. You should be thinking about what will happen after this period. Now, another thing that I've heard a lot of people talk about, especially psychologists, saying that we're going to have this period of isolation necessarily, and then what, are we going to be expected to get back to normal like that? I don't think so. I don't think people are going to get back to normal like that. If you're anything like me, it takes me a while to sort of get into this mindset of, you know, when I'm writing, it takes me a while to sort of write those first few sentences and really warm up and have a really productive day, or even a productive week. And I think it's going to be the same. You know, we're not going to sort of jump into this post-pandemic period of productivity. Gosh, the alliteration is shocking. Afterwards, and we're not going to be able to transition from this, you know, sudden shutdown, and what does this mean, you know, because we're in our part of the world, at least, we're lucky to be free most of the time. We're not going to change from that mindset into okay, suddenly you can go out and do all the things and you need to be back at university next week and everything will be fine, because it won't be. So think about what will happen afterwards. Start thinking about your financial situation as well, you know, where you're going to be, what you will want to do. But ultimately, you know, as with anything, I do believe that, you know, if you are to succeed in your project, you're the person who will be responsible for that, and you are the person who will be, you know, will make that happen. But you need to give yourself leeway. You need to be flexible in thinking about how you're going to change your project. How do you need to change your project in a situation like that? But always think, well, my success ultimately depends on how I react to this situation. It's not to say you can react in many different ways. You know, some people will deal with it better than others, depending on your, you know, your personality and you know, what support you have, what outside support you have, but really, you know, think about it. What can I do to have the best chance of success here? So really what I want you to think about first is, you know, write down what you need to do to complete your research as a whole, what you can realistically do firstly over the next 6 months. I think we'll just start at 6 months and go from there. Look at how that might push out your original plan and timelines. Adjust all of your planning charts, your Gantt charts as such, and make an assessment of how this is going to affect you. Now, when you are going to your scholarship bodies and granting bodies in universities, these are useful things to have to show how the pandemic is affecting you, where you've got all of these thought processes down in sensible format. You have the data there for the university, and you make it very easy for them to make sensible decisions on how they can best assist you or advocate for you as well. The other thing that I would like you to think about is what you need to reassess long term, whether you can complete the whole project sensibly, and what you can complete, and really have a very close think about what the project is, what you're trying to achieve, and try do as much as you can during this period to trim off the fat of the project, the extraneous things that might make it a great project, but will actually stop you from finishing and finishing as quickly and as sensibly as possible. So often perfection can be the enemy of done. And I love that phrase. I can't remember who taught it to me originally, but full credit to whoever that was. But perfection is the enemy of done in certain situations. Now, research has to be thorough, research has to be accurate, but it's not always perfect, and these are far from perfect times. But so long as you are representing, collecting the data honorably, collecting the data well, and representing the data well, the extra bits of your project that you might think might have turned it from, you know, a simple little daisy into a giant sunflower, maybe just forget about the sunflower and focus on the daisy, and do enough for your project. Don't do too much, and think about that very, very, very carefully. And I think you need to communicate that very carefully with your supervisors as well. Supervisors is another topic. You know, what you should be talking about with your supervisors is another topic we'll talk about probably next time along. So the things you need to look at in this situation are scope, budget, deliverables, the schedule that you're on, the resources that you have, communication, how you're going to communicate with people, and the further issues and risks that you've got that come up, you know, when you're dealing with, you know, a project in this pandemic situation. So think about all of these things. So that's scope of your project. What is it that is your project? What is the net project? What are you going to capture directly as part of that project? Think about it. Can these things be extraneous or out of scope? As I keep saying to my PhD candidates when I talk to them, the PhD candidates that I work with, think about it. Is what you're doing completely within the scope of your project? Do you have the budget to do it? Do you have, can you do, what are these deliverables that you have to have? It's basically there's one deliverable for a PhD ultimately, and that is the thesis. And for a research project, it's publications, and that's very important. But within that, there are sort of sub-deliverables, and I want you to really think about, can you deliver them, and how do you adapt to the fact that you might not be able to deliver everything you originally planned with a project. And think about that schedule. Think about the resources that you need. Think about your communication plan and who you need to talk to. And think about any further issues or risk you might be facing during this time. So what I do, usually in this workshop, if I run something in person on planning, not pandemic planning, as I said, this is a first for everything. I usually have a worksheet that I give out to people that has a bit of a Gantt chart and some notes on what I've said, and we work on it together in this. Being an online recording, can't do it. Online presentation, can't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a sign-in form. So if you'd like to receive access to additional resources from me, some notes on what I'm talking about during these quick lectures, or if you have any questions or suggestions for what you want me to talk about, that would be excellent. I'm going to next time talk about supervisors and dealing with your PhD supervisors and how supervisors can help their candidates best during this period, how you can work together well. I also want to talk about managing the whole parenting balance, schooling from home balance, that sort of thing. And it is a very much a tightrope format balancing act. I've certainly faced that over the past few weeks with my own family. As lovely as they are, it is tough having kids at home and finding time to do things, but you also do have to find time to be kind to yourself as well, and kind to those around you. So I really, I will be setting up a a worksheet for you and some notes from this lecture. If you have any questions or suggestions at all, please do email me. My email address I will put across the screen. I will attach this to the description of the video, and also the website for Pandemic PhD, so you can see what's there, and I will have a sign up form so you can sign up to get a password and you know, get any communications from me as well. So that's it for today. I think you probably had completely enough of working with me. I haven't been interrupted by the cockatoo. I haven't been interrupted by my children, so that's really, really lovely. Although I just had a currawong swoop past the camera, in front of the camera, which was kind of funny. So that's been fairly successful, I think, in terms of a home lecture. Please do take care, look after yourselves, and we'll just have to take a few deep breaths together until this is all over. So best of luck. Please do contact me if you have any questions. Send this on to your mates, and I'm really happy to help you in any way I can. So good luck and have a great day. Thanks.